The first day of the Sona debate, the State of the Nation address, debating that in the National Assembly. President Cyril Ramaphosa delivered that address last week, contending with an underperforming economy. So, of course, now we're moving and looking at some of the bigger issues, and we're joined in studio by Xolani Dube, political analyst from Xubera Institute for Research and Development, and from Port Elizabeth, the studios there, political analyst Ongama Mtimka. Mr. Mtimka, let me start with you. Just the leaders accusing each other of beating up their wives, is that another low for Parliament?
Good evening, Francis, and your viewers. What's happening among South African politicians is a culture which has now become entrenched to weaponize matters of justice, morality, and ethics, and only use them pursuant to political objectives rather than for justice per se. So an important question to ask from Boy Mamabulo is, at what stage, when did he get to hear that Julius Malema was allegedly abusing his wife? And when did he start acting? Well, is this the first parliamentary session after he got wind of it? Because in that case, we could give him a benefit of doubt that he acted immediately. But the second thing is that this is not the most consequential platform to deal with gender-based violence. And in fact, what he's done is, if there's any wind of truth to these allegations, he's compromised. He's creating a situation where it will be very difficult for even the purported victim to deal with this, because it comes out in a weaponized political platform, and it just it's in bad taste. But my argument is that not only on the issue of gender-based violence, but on every aspect of either justice, criminality, or ethics, South African politicians now have an entrenched culture of having information which could incriminate the next person, but not. And for them, matters of justice are not as important enough to galvanize them to take immediate action. But what they will do is they will sit on something until it is politically potent for them. We have seen this happen in the ANC. Unfortunately, we've seen it in the DA, where you find, for example, that there will be some allegations made about a leader and are known about a few other people, but only will be used once that leader falls out of favor from among politicians. If you think the issue of Patricia de Lille, Musi Maimane, the attempts at Helen Zille and staying in a funded in a house of a fund, and this latest one, purported information about gender-based violence. It's an entrenched culture which needs to be stopped. So in your discussion you had earlier on, my input in that is politicians need to be oriented and inducted on the importance of ethics per se, justice per se, not instrumentally for what it may, for what political objectives it may serve.
Now, Mr. Dube, what is your point of view? Just to follow up on that, because the amount of passion that the politicians seemed to employ in, or display rather, in attacking each other really begs the question if serious issues such as gender-based violence only enjoy that level of enthusiasm when they are weaponized, when they are used to undermine each other's authority.
Look, it was a very disappointing act today, but I don't think that we're supposed to expect anything better from those guys. Because first and foremost, what you have to understand is that the people who are in that parliament are strangers to us. We never voted for them. We voted for a party, and then the party dished us out these guys that are not accountable to us. And so whatever mayhem that they cause there, or anything that is unethical and immoral and that is insightful that they do in that House of Merchant, they know very well that us as the electorate, we are disempowered. We don't have a recourse to call them and make them account. And so what we witnessed today possibly is just a sideshow more might come. And so the question is, are we going to be trailing behind this insightful act that they are doing in the parliament, or we as South Africans, we need to start to debate and say, look, maybe our electoral system to a certain extent needs to talk to us, and so that at the end of the day, if there is such kind of a thing, we can make them accountable. Because really, to talk about what they've done today is just throwing kind of 1 kg of sugar in an ocean. You guess, I mean, it makes really no difference, to be quite honest. We need to look this issue in a holistic way and in a progressive way.
Mr. Dube, can I challenge you there? Because I think people who voted for the EFF, Julius Malema is the face of the EFF. They knew they were putting him in Parliament. And let's look at the implications for the different political parties. But for the EFF, what happened today, will that endear them more to supporters or less? What happened during the State of the Nation address as well, that 90-minute delay, will it mean more support for the EFF or less? Looking at what EFF supporters want.
Look, you have to understand that in each and every political organization that is there, they represent a particular kind of constituency. And if the people who vote for the EFF is like the birds of the same feather flock together. And I don't think that they might see something really wrong in the majority of them. But possibly the minority might question the path that the EFF is taking. But as I've said, they don't have a recourse to engage the people who are there in the parliament to represent them, because our electoral system is disempowering them, because Malema can be accountable to them. Although they elected the EFF, the political organization, and Malema was the face, just like ANC elected Jacob Zuma then as the face, but the way electing a political organization. And so that's why I'm saying whatever that is happening in that parliament is a reflection of us as South African, how disempowered we are in terms of being the role players or the main players in the national discourse.
Okay. Ongama Mtimka, let's put a face to some of these problems, mainly the issue of land. Interesting that you see some kind of agreement, conversion amongst the ANC and EFF on the issue of land and the amendment section 25 of the Constitution. The DA now saying that the wording of it, the lack of specificity on some of those clauses really does go against the grain of what they're trying to do. And ultimately it comes down to land ownership and land use. Is the language used being opaque? And do you really need to change the Constitution for better economic development, to change the value chain in terms of agricultural rights, for instance, if we're saying that all who work the land must benefit from it?
Unfortunately, Tsepi, so with respect to the land debate, emotion drives it more than fact and reality, and from both camps. If you look at Section 25 and the proposed amendments thereof, there's nothing in them that suggests what John Steenhuisen talks about, that it would fundamentally erode the protections that have been put in there. If you bring in parameters for expropriation without a compensation, the latter and spirit of the constitutionalism, what you see, it's not eroded at all. So changing Section 25 of the Constitution to specify that the parameters within which expropriation without compensation can happen is not wrong at all. Nor is it, by the way, nor is the moves around giving the minister the right to determine which lands can be expropriated or which properties can be expropriated wrong in itself, because there you put in the parameters, you put in the definitions. You don't create a situation where the courts and not the political institutions must decide on matters of land ownership. Now, a large part of the debate was also about redress and BE and affirmative action in general. general. What makes me lose patience with those who represent with some who represent the white population in South Africa is that while there are insecurities and sense of alienation about the exclusive rhetoric sometimes of some of the wannabe radical politicians is understood, there's a sense in which they want a citizenship as well as an approach to redress that's not founded on truth and genuine recognition of where we come from as a country.
Okay.
It is possible for South Africans to have,
I need to quickly ask you this because we are running out of time. There are quite a number of issues that we need to deal with. But Bulelo Mahlatsi, the ANC MP, mentioned that the ANC nationalization has never been ANC policy even from inception. Is that historically correct?
It's not historically correct. The change happened only during the transition period when the ANC got close to power at a time when the global balance of forces was changing from the Soviet Union to the West. But also it's not for ideological purity and historical alignment's sake that we should pursue policies. Policies should be pursued on the basis of their likelihood to achieve outcomes that are best both for redress as well as economic justice.
All right, thank you.
The land issue, Mr. Dube, the wheels are turning there. But I think a common theme today was the lack of implementation about previous things discussed at the State of the Nation, previous promises. Last year we were talking about ESCOM, a whole range of issues. Is that lack of implementation arming opposition parties in Parliament?
Look, I don't think so. I don't think so at all. It seems as if the opposition party, they just act like an ANC, you know. They don't give an alternative to the South Africans. They just follow what ANC is saying. And we have to also understand that most of the political organization, not even most, all the political organization who are in that parliament, they converge on a neoliberal economic policies. And so in that there is no difference. And also when it comes to the issue of land, I think we really need to do an honest introspection. If you can ask a number of South Africans, what is the plan that we have after we've expropriated land? Trust me, none of people can tell you what plan do we have. We use slogans to drive South Africans' emotions to a particular point of nothingness, to be quite honest. Because the issue of land, there was a will buyer, will seller. And we need to go back there and look at that program, whether we've made any success and failures. And if there are failures, we need to ask ourselves, how can we remedy those failures? And then how can we reinforce the success? We have not done an audit on that. And if you look recently, our government is issuing tenders on farming and so forth. And then you ask yourself, in the Eastern Cape, there is a tea plantation that just went bizarre, you get what I mean. And lots of farms in KwaZulu-Natal, if you can go around around Winan, you could find lots of land who were once the best in that province, but today they don't produce anything. And so if really South Africans are patriotic, are not driven by slogans or by seen as being revolutionary, we need to ask ourselves, what plan do we have with this land expropriation without compensation? If we have a plan, let's negotiate or let's discuss that plan and let each and every person know that plan, because I can assure you, we don't have a plan. And if we don't have a plan, trust me, we are heading to the doomsdays in this country.
And this is a whole debate on its own. So very quickly, Ongama, just moving away from land, the other promises, ESCOM, the NHI was barely mentioned in the Sona. The DA could mention the fact that the ease of doing business, there were promises last year, but not implemented. And then does that raise questions around the promises of a sovereign wealth fund, the state bank, the new ideas in this State of the Nation address?
Quick one, there are plans by municipalities and private property developers on expropriated land. If you come to PE, for example, you'll find there's a huge tracts of land for waterfront development which need to be expropriated. Expropriation is not just an emotive argument. It makes economic sense in many cities across the country. With respect to ESCOM, what was disappointing is only hearing that the plans are now gathering around the divisions and stuff, and nothing real in terms of helping to address the immediate challenge that's there. But what I liked about the president's speech around energy is the opening up of that energy market so that municipalities can be able to buy from alternative sources of energy. What we should guard against, though, is the pricing regime, so that we don't, because as you open up that market, you are opening it beyond the control of NERSA, and what may happen is that it may be difficult to control electricity prices. But there was a lot of much welcome developments that were announced, but we need to ensure that the state machinery is ready to enable those.
So I need to ask this question, listening to the AIC speak about the state of water resources, drinking water for communities in the Eastern Cape and others. It's quite an indictment on our democracy to talk about the fact, and I think the stat says something like 33% of our communities are exposed to leakages that have sewage in their water resources. So the President promised something like 126 billion rand last year to spend on building water infrastructure and security. Isn't this a little too late in the day, looking at how badly aging our infrastructure is?
Look, I think it's the issue of competency on us, on the deployees of the ANC. One needs to be specific. On the deployees of the ANC is the incompetency. And it's the same incompetency that we saw to the fall of our energy. And also is the same thing that you are going to see to the fall of water supply in our country. And the only problem that we have is that the remedy from the governing party that is entailed in that Ramatidonomics document is to privatize. And when they privatize, they are selling these services to a particular class in our society. And then there are those people who are destitute, who are not going to receive this kind of service, of which constitutionally they are supposed to be receiving it. And so I think to a certain extent, the ANC really is disempowering the working class. The ANC is really is putting the so-called the lower class in our society in a very hostile situation. And possible, to be quite honest, and we need to be very frank here, the South African needs to start to have a dialogue and ask themselves if this country is in good hands. If it is not in good hands, what can we do? Because if we deal with issues by issue, at the end of the day, we are not going to have this country. That's why I'm saying we need to have a national dialogue that is going to encompass the issue of energy, the issue of water, because as I've said, there was Ramatidonomics document. People are talking about land expropriation. It's coming back to us again to debate it. There are lots of things that are to and fro, and we end up not knowing what are the resolutions. But what we know is that at the end of the day, the people who are really poor, they don't get service that they deserve.
So we're running out of time. Ongama, very quickly, water is one of the issues. There were a few issues today, but was this really a substantive debate on the State of the Nation address, or was it a lot of politicking? Was it what you expect?
Initially, it started very badly, but I think as the day moved on, MPs made very good substantive input into the statement. It's very impassioned discussions around citizenship and the inclusiveness of that citizenship, as well as practical issues around the economy. Around water, again, anxiety is extreme privatization. One of the things that was good about those water rights issue challenges that were there was the ability to enforce some socio-economic development with allocation of water rights. My hope is that as we move towards a more laissez-faire allocation, there should be control and building in of socio-economic objectives with use of water rights. But also, we need a strong sense of urgency in this country. We tend to move, especially the president. He came at a time where the mood and the hope in the country was so low. We needed a business unusual approach which is so focused on deliverables that everything else that is marginal is not really prioritized, so that we can see real momentum, positive momentum where it matters most.
All right, thank you very much to both of you. That was Ongama Mtimka, political analyst in our studios in Port Elizabeth, and with us here in studio, Xolani Dube, political analyst at Xubera Public Institute for Research Development. And of course, lots still to talk about, the water sanitation plan, master plan that the Lindu Sisulu, the Minister of Environmental Affairs, has mentioned. So we should pick that apart a little bit more. But thank you so much.
And I think we need you two gentlemen to discuss land in future as well. That whole debate starting up again, but we're running out of time. Thank you for being with us on The Full View tonight.